Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Practical Founders Podcast, where every week we hear an amazing story from a serious founder who built a valuable software company and did it without big funding. I'm your host, Greg Head, and this week my guest is Brian Hamilton, who I'm honored to have on the program today. Brian Hamilton is a practical software founder who is one of America's most successful entrepreneurs and a leading expert on entrepreneurship. He's currently serves as the chairman of LiveSwitch, a software company. He's known for his pioneering work in fintech, his advocacy for small businesses, and his commitment to criminal justice reform. As the founder of Sageworks, which is now called Abrigo, America's first fintech company, Hamilton developed technology to translate complex financial data, empowering millions of small business owners. And through his Inmates to Entrepreneurs and the Brian Hamilton Foundation, he encourages entrepreneurship as a means of economic opportunity. His work has been showcased by major media outlets like CNBC and Good Morning America. He starred in ABC's Free Enterprise TV series, which is an award-winning show based on the Inmates to Entrepreneurs. In today's interview, we hear about Sageworks' journey, his very big exit, and Brian shares his wisdom about the power of entrepreneurship and the freedom that it can create. It's a great episode. And we're live with Brian Hamilton. Great to have you on the podcast, Brian.
Great to be here.
Yeah. You're in Raleigh, North Carolina, I think, today. Is that right?
I'm a Connecticut native for 25 years, and I've been here since I was 25. I came back to business school down here, so that's how they got me.
Yes, that migration. I started in Chicago and went south myself here. Is
Yes.
it, it's winter where you are right now. We have the big chill happening across the country. The inauguration's going to be inside today. A bank holiday, but we're still working.
I didn't know that. Although I will say this, I remember being a kid in Connecticut, and if it was like anything like below like 20, I got cold, but anything above 20, I was fine. I was running around. I never wore jackets, but in North Carolina, we'll have like 3 days of this, Greg, but we won't have like 3 weeks. So I'm glad to be in the South. It's better.
Yeah. And you've done multiple things in Raleigh. You've made it your home base and all of that. I interviewed another entrepreneur from Raleigh who had a big exit, Bill
Right.
Spruill, a couple months ago. So that whole, let's say, research triangle, Raleigh, Durham, Duke
Yes.
University, all the universities there and everything. Is it still a hot spot? Or
It
is
is.
getting hotter?
What a great question. So it's like not as much of a hidden gem as it used to be, Greg. I mean, people know if you go to Austin or Boston or wherever,
Yeah.
California, they know RTP. It's not as hidden as it used to be, but it's still a comer, definitely. And as you know, we have a lot of great companies that got started here. And if you had told me when I was growing up in Connecticut that I'd end up in Raleigh, Durham, North Carolina, I literally I went to Duke and I thought Duke was in New Jersey. So
The southern lands. Yeah.
yeah, it's like no, you keep driving south. Ended up in North Carolina. It's just crazy. I mean, life is so not fickle, but you can't ever tell these things.
Yeah, I'm in Dallas, Texas, and I never would have guessed I'd end up here. Of course, I married a woman from the Dallas-Fort Worth area and all of that. So you've created a really big company, ran it for a long time. So you did the practical founder thing that before it was cool, before it was obvious,
Yeah,
before, the technology made it easier. It's easier to make software than it used to be. But like
right.
you did it from way back when. You're onto a new venture, LiveSwitch. And Brian, you've done so many things. You created a TV series for your inmates to
Right.
entrepreneurs called Free Enterprise. You speak, you teach, you have a foundation. You're doing all of those things. Let's just start with your big win here, Sageworks,
Right. Yep.
and which you grew for 20 years and sold it to Excel KKR in, I guess, 2019. But let's just start. What was Sageworks in the end when you sold it? We'll get back to the journey and
Yeah.
the
What a
pivots
great
and all that stuff.
question.
But like, what
And
was it in the end, and what can you
yeah.
say about
So we had
selling it?
so we had hundreds of employees by then. But remember,
Okay.
Sageworks, I started, Greg, to your point, from an incubator. Literally, it was like 100 square foot office at Davis Drive in Research Triangle Park
Okay, right.
from the incubator. So it's like nobody's. It's kind of funny. I don't know how you feel. You're younger than I am, but like literally the older I get, the less confidence I have of everything because I'm
Yeah.
always so aware of what I
Yeah.
don't know. When I was younger, I was
Yes.
full of confidence but my point is, even coming on these things, like I don't wanna, like, give people, like, bad information, but I will say
Yeah.
that I've run one-person companies, 5 people companies, larger companies, so I know that journey,
Yeah.
really well, so it's good to be here. I can talk to that, and I have
Yeah.
definite ideas on how to do that the right way.
Yeah. You sold it. Can you say anything about the sale? It's not
It was a lot of
publicized.
money.
Yeah, it's a lot of money. Hundreds of
No, I don't
employees.
do Yeah, I
It
don't
was reported somewhere, 400 employees when it was sold, which probably means 50 to $100 million business, or depending on your profitability and so forth.
Yeah,
But
well, we don't forget,
yeah,
we were profitable for 10 years. We were cash flow positive,
okay, right,
not GAAP profitable, but we
yeah,
were cash flow positive for 10 years. So, we grew organically. I know you want to talk
yeah,
about that, but I
yeah,
will say this without mentioning numbers. And I do want to say this. I mean, people, I hope they will listen to this. It's a great day. You know how you check your bank balance and you
yeah,
refresh and you refresh, and all
yeah,
of a sudden you hit the refresh number. I was like, whoa,
boom,
so I wish it for everybody. And I always say that, um, I always say that I never feel competitive with any entrepreneurs, like truly, not at all, because we've gone through a very special journey. It's like a brotherhood.
yeah.
So I always like to hear
Brotherhood of
about
pain, right?
yes, and that, by
Yeah,
the way, definitely, but yeah, for sure. So it's like a brotherhood, we or sisterhood or whatever. We've been through a lot together. It's a very common journey, and I love to hear about successful entrepreneurs because it's so damn hard to do.
yeah. That's right. Well, and you sold the company, you got the bank account. We'll just talk about that as well. That's always a head game
Right,
thing for
right,
crazy entrepreneurs. You're
right,
addicted to cash flow and employees and everything every day for 20 years, and then you're not, right?
right.
That's another thing
Yeah.
there. You created a foundation. You are a hyperactive helper in the world and speak a lot about entrepreneurship there. And you, I guess, bought a new company, with,
Yeah, I invested in a new
yeah,
company, a new
uh-huh,
outfit, LiveSwitch, really
yeah,
great guys from, Canada, Vancouver,
yeah,
Jared
yeah,
Venema, great guy. Amen, I ran into him, and we have our own video stack, like, we own this this application that you have here
yeah, yeah,
was
that we're
built on a
recording.
video stack, and we own our own video stack, and now we're developing video applications at LiveSwitch, and what we're trying to do is technology enable small businesses because, as you know,
Right.
it's one of the reasons I agreed to come on here. Small businesses face incredible competition
Yeah,
competition from big box retailers, big tech. So we want to technology enable the small guys to be able to compete in the market. So I'm excited about our new company. Although I will say, it has not been easy. Oh my
yeah,
goodness, I'm so
yeah,
stupid for doing it. I can't believe it. But
yeah.
um,
Isn't that funny? We keep doing it here, and then we
yeah,
convince ourselves, and then it's not easy, and then we
right,
figure it out.
right.
But,
Yeah.
you're a hardcore guy. You grew up, without the advantages, and then fought your way. You created small businesses to get yourself through college and
Right.
MBA, and you created this, software company, Sageworks, out of the dirt and grew it gritty for all those years. I can't imagine you sitting on your hands, Brian,
No,
and
I
not get
no,
another
and I
business.
don't I have to say, I have to confess, I don't like golf, it's too slow for me,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't get it, actually, and I know people love it, but I
yeah,
don't get it, so,
yeah,
yeah, I still and honestly, just being direct, like, I feel like I've got all the energy in the world, my boys are now out of the
yeah,
house.
yeah.
They're doing well, and they don't seem to hate me, so that's nice, and, but basically, they're out, and I've got all this energy, and I have a lot of wisdom, so the idea is to leverage that into another
Yeah.
company, and it's working, so that's good.
Yeah, I didn't have the ticket for another company, Brian, so I'm doing a version of this, which is,
Yeah,
and I'm inside 40, software businesses with founders every month, so
right.
I see the pain and suffering, and the small wins
Yeah.
that pile up and so
Well,
forth.
it sounds like, bullshit, Greg, but it's really not that. I'm very passionate about helping entrepreneurs
Yeah.
because, there's a lot of misinformation out there. I mean,
Oh my goodness.
like, there's always misinformation. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter you're pro-vaccine, you're against vaccine. Not there might be, like, nuances of misinformation, but with entrepreneurship, there is, incredible misinformation. So, I really am passionate about talking to these entrepreneurs to help them. And so
Yeah.
I'm glad to be here because
Yeah.
we need better information getting to the entrepreneurs. There's so much horseshit out there about how to build a company, and it's promulgated by people who would benefit. So
Yes.
yes.
Yeah.
Anyway,
People say, why is there in any, uh there's always an interest there. And people say, well, how come nobody's talking about this hidden majority of software companies that are not raising VC funding? And I said, I wait and pause. I said, there's a
yeah.
reason. Is that the tech media and the tech ecosystem in Raleigh-Durham and everything is brought to you by the funding. You should get funding so you can spend it on me, the lawyers. That's why we have
Right.
this conference. And,
Right.
for the most part, the industrial complex is helped
Well, it's a
foment these
yeah.
myths.
By the way, we could talk about this for 3 hours. I don't wanna bore anybody, but we've institutionalized entrepreneurship and sort of conned the entrepreneurs to think that they need professional funding to start a company.
Yeah, let's
Now,
go.
if you and I went out and started a construction company, we might need a truck. We might need a
Yeah.
but the beautiful thing about IP and software is you can bootstrap it,
Yeah.
and we've been sold it's amazing, and then the media gets involved, like, "Oh, they raised $400 million." I'm like, "For what?" Like, "Really? We're
Yeah.
doing software." So, the point is, like, I think, again, this is one of the really hot button issues for me is, like
Yeah.
and we gotta talk about it. Why do people start a business? I mean, I don't know why you did, I know
Mhm.
why I did. Freedom, we want freedom, we wanna control our destiny. I
Yeah.
remember my first job was at a bank. For about 9 months, they were gonna fire me. I quit before they fired me, but, like, I'm in a
They don't
cube.
like freedom inside the bank, probably.
No, no,
So,
no,
yeah.
they do like cubes, we have a lot of cubes. So, I'm in a cube all day long, and, I had been used to I was president of my student government, I had used to
Mhm.
having a lot of latitude, that type of thing. Now I'm in a cube, and I guess what I'm trying to say is people start businesses, yeah, gotta make money, gotta keep score, but for freedom. So, the thing is this, is when you start going the institutional route, your freedom is going from here, and it's gonna go down. It ain't gonna go up. So unless you really need to do that to scale, and we could talk about this later,
Yeah.
there's a lot of BS information out there about, "Oh, I need to do" by the way, where do they invent these things? Series A, Series B, Series C, Series D. That's literally invented in the last 10 years.
Phases of the addiction, right.
Well, it's invented as a term, and it takes on a life of its
Yeah.
own. Series A,
And then
Series
we're
B,
gonna do our Series B, and then we're gonna do our C Series, and then dot, dot, dot. That's how you do it.
rather than hey, this is the amount of money we need to grow to the next stage. And so I've always used a very practical approach to this. And I mean, even guys like Elon Musk, I mean, he's pretty smart, I
Yeah.
think he's done pretty well. I don't understand the whole Mars thing, but he's done a lot of really great things. But the guy got fired, I think, from his first two companies.
Yeah.
He let the VCs in early. I mean, he literally got fired. I mean, I know
Yeah.
for sure he did from
Yeah.
PayPal.
Yeah.
So if you're an entrepreneur and you want freedom, if that's part of your mix, it's definitely part of my mix.
Yeah.
There's a way to do it well
Yeah.
and frankly a lot better. And you bootstrap, you learn, you make mistakes, you
Yeah.
correct yourself. That's a very, very strong opinion.
Well, let's dig into that, and we'll talk about Sageworks in a minute here. When you say freedom, I think you and I are about the same age, right? Came up in the '90s and grew
Right.
things there. We didn't have this idea of freedom, meaning cash flow businesses so we can sit on a beach and do
Right.
whatever. Freedom meant more like control. I wanna do it my
Yes.
way.
That's
I want
correct.
my thing. I don't wanna have other people telling me what to do.
Yeah.
Is that what you mean, or do you
Oh
mean
yeah.
something? Yeah.
Well, let me not answer it, and then I'll answer it.
Yeah.
So think about this. Seriously, think about this. 100 years ago, you got about 50% of the people in this country, 50 to 60%, excluding farms.
Yeah.
50 to 60% of the people own their own business.
Right.
About 50 years ago, that dropped down to like 25%,
Uh-huh.
and it's 9% now. So I mean, that is
Wow.
dangerous for our capital. You probably see, most people don't know
Yeah.
that. And
Uh-huh.
so very dangerous for the capitalist system because we need new
Yes.
company formation. We need new ideas. We got to bring out the big guys who get too big and they get sloppy. We got to be replacing them. So that ecosystem is very much in danger in the
Yeah.
United States right now, and we got to protect it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and I know you have a lot to say about entrepreneurship, not just start a software company and do it this way. There's many ways to do it. Um, you help small business owners, and your inmates to entrepreneurs. You're helping folks who are
Right.
judiciously challenged,
Yeah. That's right.
judicially challenged
Yeah.
to start their own business and gain their own freedom, and teach them the laws of nature. You're very passionate about that. Did you always know you were an entrepreneur when
What a
you got
great
to the bank and you
yeah.
said, "No, I'm not gonna do this"? I had a version of that.
What a great question. I mean, wow. I mean, I've never been asked that question. And so I'm thinking and thinking, here's what I knew. When I was 8 years old or 9 years old, literally 10 years old, I couldn't get a job. So I was like,
Yeah.
well, let me go cut a lawn, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah. Uh-huh.
so those were practical things. And I am a little older than you, by the way. But it was a day of where, I want to get a Snickers bar. It was 11 cents. And well, let me go cut a couple of lawns. And that I began that journey very early. The other thing that happened to me is my old man used to do odd jobs
Mhm.
at these rich people houses,
Yeah.
like the kind of
Uh-huh.
house you probably have now that I have. Like,
Yeah.
and we do odd jobs. And I didn't know anything about entrepreneurs. I didn't know about anything about anything. And I would go accompany him on the weekend because, I was the only time I could spend with my father was a second job. And I ran into these people called entrepreneurs in Southport, Connecticut, literally Southport, Connecticut, the land of the great Gatsby, the big
Mm.
pillars. And I'm like, this is for me. This is for me. That was very early on that their lifestyle was something that I wanted to be a part of. And it was
Were you
fundamentally
on
that,
the outside in, the outside of those gates, looking in
yes.
saying, "I didn't grow up like this," and then you look at the big
Yeah.
lawn and the house on the lawn and the people
Yeah.
on the house on the lawn and say, yeah, I need to go."
Yeah,
Something like that.
the I don't know, is it Great Expectations, that guy Pip,
Yeah.
P-I-P? I always felt like Pip, like, he was around Miss Havisham and all this wealth, but he was from a not, wealthy background,
Yeah.
and I was like, "Boy, this looks a lot easier than the way my father has to work." So I was an early buyer.
Yeah. Well, and there's something about entrepreneurship that is, let's say, misfits. We kind of get
Yes.
in we kind of get in the organization, and we realize we want the freedom to not be in the organization. And
Yes.
entrepreneurship doesn't always pay, right, to get the house on the hill or whatever.
Right.
But it succeeded for you. And I'm sure it was a crazy journey. Let's
Yes, it
talk
was.
about Sageworks,
Sure.
your software company. What was the precursor and the epiphany that led you to start a software company? You didn't go to school in the '90s, and people say everybody's starting a software company. If you're not starting a
Right.
software company, you're not cool. Or maybe like what was
No,
what?
wow, another great question. So in 1993, maybe, I was teaching a course at the Duke University Continuing Education Department and financial stuff.
Yeah,
I knew that stuff cold, so it was just
you're
like
a
a
finance guy. You
sort
know that
of,
stuff. Yeah,
yeah.
okay.
I don't know what guy I am, but maybe. But I was teaching there, and, I was doing, like, analysis, financial analysis,
Mm,
ratio analysis, that type of thing. This goes back 90, maybe 91. It was a long time ago.
yeah.
And I looked at the board and I'm like, wow, someone should automate this. It's not that hard. And that was an idea that got tucked away. And this
Ah,
little woman, a very, very good friend of mine, she doesn't like when I give her age, but a little woman comes up to me, Sarah Torville, 4'1" or whatever. She comes up to me. She goes, she's a database developer for Unisys, and
mm,
she goes, if you can write that expert system out, I can program it. And I became friends with her. But the tipping point to answer your question was I worked with a very, very capable guy who ran a pharmaceutical CRO company.
mm.
Very, very smart dude. And I remember he came in one day to my office, like, "Hey, tell me, what do these numbers mean? What do these financial numbers mean?" And this guy's like a PhD and super
Wow.
bright. And that was it. That was the light bulb. I think it was 97. And I was like, wow, I've heard this over and over. I heard it at the bank. I've heard it from the clients that I had at the time that they couldn't really very readily read their financial statements. That became the light bulb moment where I said, "Look, I'm gonna develop an expert system technology that takes numbers and converts those numbers into language," and that started Sageworks. That was I started in 1998, so
Well,
it
that sounds like a
Yep.
2024 AI startup,
Yeah,
right? Which is there's this
yeah, that's
pile of
true.
data, it's hidden.
Yeah,
Yes, there's software to go process it, but it's not solving the problem. We need to
yeah,
re-explain it in English and so forth. Is
yeah,
that literally what you were doing? Feed in your
yeah,
data and
yeah,
it would describe it to you in English,
yeah.
AI-like, or was
It's
it using
yeah,
AI
it's
or
still out it's
okay.
still out there, profitsense.com. It's
Yeah.
used by, tons of people all over the place,
Hmm.
but that was the moment, and then more specifically, because 'cause I've always had this passion, I was like, "Hey, let's get this application in the hands of small business people
Yeah.
who are
Mhm.
already struggling. Let's help them understand their financials and also make recommendations as to how they can improve performance." And, of course, the rest is history, but that's the genesis of the
Yeah.
company.
And what was that? I mean, did it use AI or was it just, better than a spreadsheet kind of
Yeah.
determinative software?
Yeah, wow. So, we use these terms called algorithms, but
Yeah.
but literally it was an algorithm-based expert system that I built.
If this, then that. Yeah.
Yeah, and pretty complex. I mean, I don't know what
Yeah.
it was. We could generate
Yeah.
32 trillion different reports and all this other stuff.
Yeah, we
But
called it an expert system. If you program the if this or that,
it was
logic in there,
it
right, that was an
was
expert system that
it
would help
was
you
early
decide. Yeah,
yeah, it was early AI. It was
yeah.
early AI. Yeah, it was
Okay,
definitely
great.
so yeah, so I know something about that actually.
So
So,
was that the first, incarnation of Sageworks, which
yes.
is this feed your financials in here somehow and we'll explain it to you?
Yeah, that was it. I mean, it's called
Wow.
profitsense.com, and, of course, I spent, 2 years, like, writing 10,000 pages of an expert system and blah, 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 like, literally too,
Mhm.
and, we got out, and then the issue was, "Okay, we got this." They say in entrepreneurship, "If you build it, they will come," but that's
Yeah,
not always
yeah, but
true.
yeah, right. Yeah,
Yeah, it's not
yeah,
true. So, basically, then I had to figure out where to sell the stuff, and then that took some time, so
yeah. So what was the business in the beginning when it got up? Was it selling that profit sense to small business or
yeah.
was that okay,
Yep,
yeah.
that was the first product, yep, and
Like you'd
that
knock on doors and say, "You want
yes,
to do this?" That kind of thing?
yes, I
Wow,
did, yeah, that's
wow.
another gr that's I haven't been asked that one either, yeah, so, basically, our first customer, I won't never forget this, is, the Bank of Asheville. Amy Spell. Amy, if you're out
Mm.
there, still, I love you. Amy Spell bought a Profit Sense report for $14. And that was the first customer, but then we got into it in Citibank, and a bunch of
Oh.
companies.
So you pretty quickly went to the people who serve the small business to
That's
build
correct.
that into their system.
Very smart.
Right,
That's
I
right.
see, okay.
Yeah, by
And
the way, just small little
yeah.
detail, that didn't work as a model, that we were in the CPA market for about 10 years.
Oh, I get you, but the little guys who are helping the little guys.
Right. But
Yeah,
it didn't work as a model. We eventually shifted to selling to banks,
yeah,
financial analysis platforms, and
yeah.
then the rest is history. That's when the business really took off.
So was this for years, this scrappy, brainchild, idea that you had built this thing and were crafting the product, probably Windows software back then,
Yeah, it was.
and, looking for customers and figuring out where the game is, and
Yes.
you bootstrapped it, you didn't have funding. I
Yes.
mean, you kinda had to make
Well,
what you eat or something like that, or did you get a little
yeah.
funding?
Well, you're boy, you're bringing about so many good memories. I haven't thought about this in years. When we, being me,
Yeah.
when I got Citibank as a client in early 2000, I went out and did a little round of financing. It was like
Okay.
$60,000. It was
Yeah, yeah,
nothing.
yeah.
And it's funny about that too, Greg. I have to say this. I gotta say this because there's people listening to this, and our job here. I try to stay off of me and onto helping. Like, let's help
Yeah,
people,
yeah.
right? I gotta say this. When I started Sageworks, well, before I started Sageworks, I had a chain in my 20s, a chain of coin laundromats. Just to be clear,
Yeah, cash
I,
flow
I
machines,
yeah,
literally. Yeah.
I did not know tech.
Yeah.
So I would go to these little entrepreneurial groups or whatever, and I remember meeting this guy. I won't give his name, but he's a pretty prominent venture capital guy. And I remember going to him and saying, "Hey, I got this idea for an expert system." This was like '97,
Yeah.
roughly.
Hmm.
And I got I think it's a great idea for a product, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, I said, what do you need to do? He goes, you need $1 million.
Yeah. Right.
And I'm like, okay, well, I don't have $1 million. I said, would you give it to me? He goes, no, I won't give it to you, but you need $1 million.
Yeah. All right.
And
That was a formula.
yeah, and I remember that incredibly well. And if we don't, who knows how we're going to help people today? I hope we do. But if I can communicate this one thing decently, I want to. So here I am. I want to start a company. You need $1 million. Then I went to another venture capital. You need $1 million. Will you give it to me? No, I'm not going to give it to you. But you need it. And I'm like, all right. So and this is very important because every entrepreneur listening to this right now, Greg, every single one will relate to this. So now I got a choice. I'm going to listen to the smarty pants
Hmm.
who tell me what I need to do, but aren't going to help me, or I'm going to do it on my own.
Yeah.
And so what I did, and I want to nail this. Okay, I need $1 million, right? I started going deeper. I said, okay, well, what do I need? Well, you need a
Yeah.
software program, a
Hmm.
product. You got to sell something.
Hmm.
Okay, well, what do you need to do that? Well, it needs to be programmed. I'm like, okay, it needs to be programmed with what? Well, it's called a programming language. And I remember this like it was yesterday. I'm like, okay, a programming language. Do you mean like what? Like C plus. I'm like,
Yeah. Right.
okay, how much does that cost? Now, this is a really important point.
Uh-huh.
How much does that cost? And well, I don't know. You can get it Office Depot like $69. I'm like,
Yeah.
great. $1 million less $69. Okay, now what do I need? Well, you got to get someone to program it. And I'm like, well, I don't have money for a programmer. I don't really. And then I had my friend Sarah, and she programmed it. And I'm like, do you
Yeah.
know we got that business off the ground for 10 grand? I mean, like nothing. And,
Of
and
written
my point,
expense. A lot of time, of course, but yeah.
yeah,
Uh-huh.
but the point, just like me, that's why I'm telling you, it's the truth about me. I've lost confidence as I get older because I realize the nuances of how I'm wrong, right? But I want everybody to listen to that. You can't believe everything you hear. You
Yeah.
don't need $1 million. You don't need $1 million today to do that. You never needed that. But if you go, and this is every entrepreneur will relate to this, if you think a little creatively about what you want to do, and if you're an entrepreneur, you got to do that.
Yeah.
What do you actually need to start? So, there it became a big business, and it was self-funded. And
Hmm.
of course, as I get customers, then people want to invest and everything changes.
Yeah. How long did it take to be, to start paying yourself? Maybe, it wasn't the SaaS model back then. Maybe that was $1 million in revenue or
A
something
long
like that. And
time.
yeah.
Yeah, that was one of the hard parts. It was probably 6, 7 years probably.
And how did you support yourself when you were, investing your
Yeah,
time and maybe some money into the business and not paying
yeah.
yourself?
Coin laundromat money.
Okay, you kept the other business going,
No, well,
literally.
I kept it
Yeah.
going until
Oh, you sold it.
2001, but then I sold it, so I had some money, so yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you were nitty-gritty about this, but you didn't take it on faith that it's a tech company is different. You start raising money and get programmers. That was the playbook in the old days that
Right,
Windows software was expensive. You needed at least a few programmers, then you needed more money to go to market and
right,
start selling it. So if you were in a hurry, right, you raised $1 million, which today is like a $10 million raise,
right.
in all of that. And that was kind of the playbook. There was bootstrap founders before that who said, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to start writing it and we're going to start selling it and so forth.
Right.
So did the business, I mean, you had all those, is this going to work? We
Right.
thought it's over here. We're
Oh,
going to
yeah.
try this. Eventually, it ended up being one of the leading software for banks to put in
Right,
data on a small
right,
business and get lending assessments and benchmarks and risk
right,
analysis and that kind of thing.
right.
But how long did it take to turn into what Sageworks ended up being?
Well, it's another great I'll keep it tight. I mean, we
Yeah.
first started selling to CPAs for about 10 years, but we boy, that was really strange because I would go the reason I developed the program is because the CPAs and the bankers weren't
Yes.
providing
Right.
consulting to the. So
Right.
now here I am selling to the CPAs as distributors, and these guys, most of them would look at me like I had two heads. I'm like, the purpose of financial data is to help you make better decisions. We don't
Yeah. Yeah.
prepare income statements and balance sheets for the hell of it. We do it because we can understand and then do something. And
Mm,
most accountants are really
yes.
bad at that. My goodness.
Yes.
So
They're
what
good at the
happened?
scorekeeping, but not at the playing the game. Yeah.
Yeah, they're good at compliance, they're good at tax returns,
Yeah.
but as an owner, like I want someone to help me grow my business, right? So
Yeah.
but it was hard selling to those guys because they were so focused on in my, not all of
Mhm.
them, by the way, but obviously, but on compliance and stuff like that, that they, it was hard to get through to them. So,
Yeah.
so the big change at Sageworks was when I just got tired of the CPAs and all that
Yeah.
crap, and basically decided to go to the bank market with financial analysis software, and that changed everything.
Okay. And was it the same kind of thing, which is feed in a bunch of financial statements and assess it and process it and,
Yeah,
spit out something else?
sorta.
Or
No,
was there something, I'm generalizing, of course, but
it's a great question. No, sorta, not really. It was
mm,
really helping banks to evaluate the creditworthiness of their clients,
I see.
but largely using what we would call spreadsheet technology.
I see.
So
Okay.
it wasn't super innovative or unusual. And I can talk about that too.
Yeah.
But really where our expertise was in listening to the customers and pivoting the product
I get
to
it.
do stuff that Moody's and S&P did not do. And that worked really great. That was good.
This week's podcast is sponsored by my friends at Cypress Growth Capital. My favorite milestone for practical SaaS founders is after you've survived the first few crazy years and you have some repeatable sales and a growing team and perhaps a little profit showing up. You know you could grow faster with a little outside capital, but the thought of raising money from VCs would change your whole game. And we know VC funding is the most expensive growth capital on the planet. That's why so many practical SaaS founders I know have partnered with Cypress Growth Capital when they hit that predictable growth inflection point. For 15 years, Cypress has provided non-dilutive growth funding to bootstrap SaaS founders, including many of the successful founders I've had on this podcast. They love practical founders. Cypress provides enough patient capital for you to invest in your growth without giving up any of your precious equity or having to guarantee a loan personally. Their investment team has people like you who have grown and sold successful software and technology companies, and their operational and entrepreneurial experience helps them give you strategic guidance at those key inflection points in your business. So go to cypressgrowthcapital.com/practical and learn more, and contact Cliff Santel at Cypress to see if there's a fit. Now back to our podcast. Well, Brian, isn't that the thing in a business? Because we're not making up new things in the world. There's a few things are made up, but like most businesses are doing something normal. I'm not making up software and bootstrapping and podcasting
Right.
and all of that.
Right.
But isn't it just listening to the customer that isn't being served and figuring out what they need
Yep.
and solving that, giving them value, charging less, more than you spend, and
Right.
chasing it at faster than everybody else, something like that? Or
Yeah, that is what it is. Unfortunately, as you know, I mean, this stuff sounds like such bumper sticker stuff, but if you follow the customer, you really listen to the customer, you care about what the customer thinks about the product, you're making the product better, I would say you're virtually guaranteed to succeed because so few companies do that. And like
yeah,
really, like, and that was the advantage. My son is getting his PhD in math.
mm,
I always tell Nolan, I said, "You think you know everything." I said, "You're very smart, but you don't have any
yeah,
wisdom, you know?" But he doesn't like that. I can't imagine why. But he did make a point about a couple months ago. I'm like, "Yeah, I never thought about it." He goes, "It's probably a competitive advantage in tech that you ran some blue collar
yeah,
businesses before you did
right,
technology, because if you, as you
yeah,
know, if you do these basic businesses and you're not listening to the customer, you're not making the
yeah.
product better, you're
That's
hiring the
all there
wrong
is.
people."
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So I fell uphill, I guess, in that I had to do it the hard way, but it really helped me out later
So
on.
was this one of those companies in Raleigh that nobody heard of? It was over here in the corner. You didn't show up at the tech events and the
Yes,
funding events and all that
yes,
stuff. It was in the, that little office down the
yes,
road and,
yeah.
slogging away and selling to small businesses, which ain't that cool,
Yeah.
but
It
eventually it
was,
turned
yeah.
into 100 employees. Did it become known in Raleigh? Is this little company
Yeah,
that grew up in the
eventually it
corners? Yeah.
did.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I mean, eventually it did. We would get some local awards, that kinda thing, but we were low key. By the way, there's another dude, got this little company called Epic Games.
Yeah.
They're the maker of what's that famous game?
No idea.
It's
Mhm.
huge. I mean, like, if you and I probably don't do gaming, but it's huge. I mean, half your
Mhm.
listeners will definitely know who it is. But Epic Games has this massive product. I mean, they're
Fortnite, I
massive.
guess. I'm checking my
Yes,
Google Brain.
for
Yes. Yeah.
Fortnite, yeah. Fortnite is,
Huge.
huge, right? But that dude was literally a mile from us, same thing. He started, he's working, nobody ever hears about him, and then all of a sudden now, of course,
Yeah.
to his credit, he's a huge success, which is great.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of what I discovered after years growing software companies, two companies to 100 million, and VC funding for some of that, or some of the growth phases there since the early 90s. And I started documenting all the software companies in Phoenix, where I was, gregslist.com of all the software companies.
Yeah,
I was meeting with them,
I
and
like
people were
that
trying
one.
to connect with
Yeah,
me, and I just started listing them. And pretty soon I had a list of 500 software companies 80% nobody had ever heard of, but they're there in town. They don't show up at the events. They
right.
sell in this vertical market. They're doing this, they don't
Yeah,
care about funding. They're not trying to look cool. It's literally the
right.
hidden majority. You just can't
Yes.
see them. And it takes so
Yeah,
little to start a software company these days. Like even, almost less than the $69 you used for Microsoft C++
yes.
back in the day. So
Yeah.
I totally get that.
Yeah, and by the way, just, on that point, I think it's crucial to mention. It's not even that people are just low key. It's that's there, see, here's the thing, man. Oh my goodness. There's an incubation period required for any business. Now, some businesses, it's a day. Hey, congratulations.
I
It's
know.
never been
I'm
that
like to
way
meet
for
that guy.
me.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, I mean, and by the way, I hope
Everybody.
the Google guys or whoever did that. But most of us, we need a year, 2 years, 3 years. In our case at Sageworks, it was 10 years. And it's not like we weren't getting anywhere, but it wasn't like the left arm was not connecting with the right arm. And
The
so
wandering in
we
the
had to
desert
work.
years, right, yeah.
But I want to say this to the entrepreneurs, especially tech entrepreneurs. The media does a disservice in a lot of ways, but they definitely do a disservice on, oh, you get this great tech idea and then your business takes
Yeah,
off. I have, well, I've never seen
yeah,
it. I've
uh-huh,
heard it, but it takes
yeah,
time
yeah.
sometimes.
Well, that's kind of the part of the practical founder thing, that time to incubate and experiment and survive long enough to experiment again and
Right.
incubate again and, keep doing that. When you raise VC funding early on, you start with funding, the clock starts, and you don't have the time or
Yeah.
the openness to, try a whole
Yes.
bunch of things. And you also talked about follow the customer and love your customer, care the customer, and figure out what that thing is. You raise funding, at least half your business is about the funding, right? And attention as a
Yeah.
CEO. So I think it takes time
It's
away from
amazing
your
too now.
customers. Yeah.
It's amazing. Like, this guy raised that guy amount and this guy raised that amount. I'm like, don't you know you got to pay it
Yeah.
back?
Yeah.
In other words, I want to buy a house. I got to get a mortgage. I'm like, all right, well, I need the mortgage. I guess it's great you get the mortgage, but I'm not celebrating the fact that I got
Right.
$1 million mortgage on a house, meaning it's such a weird thing. And by the way, I've met Mark Cuban. He's a nice
Yeah.
guy.
Yeah.
I mean,
Hmm.
I did a show with him. But this all this Shark Tank crap is just BS. Like, the idea that you gotta start a company and go get these godlike characters to invest in your company, it's just not true. It doesn't work. So the Shark Tank dynamic, in my opinion, has had a huge effect on what people think
Yeah.
they need to do to grow a
Yeah, and
company.
in every
So
ecosystem,
yeah,
literally around the world, the big cities, there's the Shark Tank of the funding pitch days and the game and who's gonna win and who gets blessed, and I got the funding and the
right.
clapping, and so forth.
Can I say something too? And I
Sure.
probably shouldn't say it. I probably shouldn't. I have no discipline. I gotta say this. I was the first person in my family to go to
Yeah.
college, literally. I mean, I
Mhm.
got like 40 cousins, and I went to college. I went to Sacred Heart University, had a good experience. Then I end up back on this second school I go to for a master's degree from this outfit called Duke University, right? And I ended up on the West Campus. I'm like, oh my goodness, what am I doing here? It was so intimidating to me because I was like, had never been around that much money and I could barely speak for 2 years. It's really
Yeah.
true. It really is. But here's my point. Here's my point. I've realized this about myself. It took me a long time. There are people who can do the venture thing. They come with the PowerPoint and they got it, and we got
Mhm.
this, and our market cap's this, and our
Secret
addressable
language, yeah.
market's that.
Mhm.
And they're great at that. And, of course, most of them fail, but small detail, but they're great at it, right? I realized very early on, even though I've got the prestige of the Duke degree and, you know, uh, I am a misfit.
Mhm.
Those guys don't get me. They didn't get me at graduate school. They don't get me. Most of them land in PE firms and venture firms. They don't get me. And we're even because I don't get them either. So my point to you is that you got to really know
Mhm.
yourself, right? Like I'm not the type of guy who's going to sit in a Greg, I'm not going to sit in a PowerPoint and we're here and we're this and this and cell A3 relates to cell B45. Oh, in 3 years we'll be a $5 billion
Yeah.
company. I know too much to know that doesn't work. So I'm going to go make a call out to all the misfits out there, right? The people, you're not really totally synced in with your reference group, with your, hey, welcome to entrepreneurship because that's what it's all about. When I'm hiring people for a new company, I want them misfits. I want brilliant people who don't quite gel into the
Mhm.
corporate thing. They don't quite gel into the venture thing. Entrepreneurship has been institutionalized. So the call out is here. You can do it without
Yeah.
that.
Well, it used to be the misfits, and we knew we were misfits. We were the smart people in the '90s working on the software thing that wasn't cool or big or sexy or money
Right.
yet, and everybody said, like, for the first 10 years of my career in tech, everybody said, "When are you gonna get a real job?" And
Yeah.
then boom,
I
everything
know.
exploded, and since then, this is
No, I've
what you
heard
do,
that.
right? The MBAs finally showed
Yeah.
up and so forth, but the practical
Yeah.
founders here can relate. We're all doing something abnormal in the world to go against the grain,
Right.
to find the hole, to do the thing the other people won't do, and it's ironic that entrepreneurship, which is a lonely, painful, misfit kind of
Right.
sport, has been glamorized.
Yeah, you know what I always say? I know Greg
Yeah.
and I don't know you or getting to know each other, but if I have to guess about you, I always say this. Most entrepreneurs are gonna be great in the American Revolution. We don't know the enemy,
Yeah.
we don't know the terrain, we don't have the models worked
Yeah.
out, we have to
Yeah.
improvise. But those entrepreneurs are not gonna be the D-Day
Yes.
planners. You see what I'm
Right.
trying to say?
Big. Yeah. General Patton, right? Playing this game. Yeah.
Yeah, like where it's all
Yes. Yeah.
processized and
Yeah.
all that. And frankly, it takes a lot more skill to start a country than to run the country.
Ah.
So if you're a misfit and you're listening to this, don't feel bad because you're probably more skilled than you realize.
Yeah. To me, that's kind of the freedom game. When somebody tells me what to do and how to do it in the swim lanes, even my wife, just do this. I can't. I can hardly
You
handle
should
it.
do
I
it.
gotta say no. I gotta see what's going on. I gotta figure it out. I gotta
Yeah.
solve the
Big
new
mistake you
puzzle.
had no big hey, none of this applies to marriage. You gotta do what she said.
Yeah, right. All of this advice do the opposite. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's funny.
Bad,
Yeah.
man. Hey, listen, for all the practical founders out there, listen to your wife, listen to your
Yeah, yeah,
husband.
that's funny. So you grew this company and it started to catch with the banks and the financial credit unions and everybody doing lending and it started to work and
Yep,
it started to go. And you weren't the crazy revolutionary founder anymore. You had 100
yeah,
employees and then more than that.
yeah,
You had to be the CEO and
right.
play that game. Was that hard for you as the crazy, scrappy
No, no, not
revolutionary, or
really.
you
I think
figured
that's
out how to
another
play that
great
scale
question.
phase?
No, I think that's another misnomer. I mean, it's absolutely a fact. If you look at American history, I mean, Henry Ford was an
Yeah.
entrepreneur who built a pretty big
Yeah.
company. Bill Gates was an entrepreneur who built a pretty big
Yeah.
company. it's always problem solving. So I
Mm.
don't buy that you're an entrepreneur and you can't build a huge company because I know that's not
Ah,
true. So, but it changes. I will say the problems change quite a bit.
yeah.
And you get more personnel things and stuff like that's not so much fun. And we were heavily regulated by the end because we sold to so many banks. So
Oh,
we, it got, to be honest, it just, for me, it just got a little boring, just to
yeah.
be
Well,
candid.
did you start, Sageworks to say, "Someday I'll sell this and buy the house in, you know, the fancy
Yeah.
neighborhood and win the prize," and, that whole Great Gatsby kinda dream? Like, did you build it to sell it someday, or was it some other
I
yeah.
had a very, I haven't thought of any of this.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a great question. I had a very specific financial target in mind for me,
Yeah,
really,
the number.
right from the
Yeah.
get-go. So, and it was a very high number.
Yeah.
So, to be honest, I never thought I'd get there because, I was like, wow, I mean, you don't even have $1 million, never mind a half a
Yeah,
billion,
yeah,
or
yeah, yeah.
whatever, like, yeah,
Well, isn't that interesting? And what was it about you that grew up, without the advantages, yeah, of the big
right,
neighborhood and the big schools and so forth,
right.
and feeling on the outside of that? And what was it that made you say, "I want that, and I think I can do it"?
Oh, well, desire, really. I
Yeah.
mean, just desire, honestly. Even to this day, I'm telling you, it's so true. I have seen an inverse relationship between my confidence and my experience. Seriously. No,
No,
really.
I
Like,
I
I
totally
am
get it.
so
Yeah,
aware, right, of everything that can go
right.
wrong and everything I'm saying
Yeah,
to you. But I will say this, my desire was
off the
very, very
charts,
high.
yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
It
And you
is.
could do the
It is.
math, say, enough customers, enough,
Yes.
profit, enough this.
Right. Yes.
Did you get growth funding along the way? The bigger you get, the
Yeah,
more
we
people
did.
say, "Here's a
We did.
VC or, uh, private equity or
I don't even
debt,"
know
or
if I'm
something
allowed.
like that? How did
Yeah,
you fuel
yeah.
this, when you knew you were onto something?
I think the total invested capital for that company was like 2.5 million
Yeah.
bucks. So it was always
Yeah.
individuals, and all the institutional
Very
guys,
practical.
"Oh, the individuals will give you a hard time," and this and that. I literally got one phone call in 20 years from a guy about an address change. I never had a
Yeah, and
problem,
then
so
when
I
you
don't.
called them and said, "Here's your prize," they probably were a little
Yeah.
shocked.
Yeah, that's a good
Yeah,
day.
that's a good day for you. The little
That's a
angel
good day.
funding, the friendly angel, which is very practical, like, they're not
Yeah.
controlling your freedom,
Right.
impeding on you. But
Yeah.
VCs, if they give you $10,000,000 and value your company at 50,000,000, you need to get to 500 or, they're on you.
Well, I'm gonna say something I shouldn't say too. I think okay. I think they make a mistake. I think they think that they have something to do with the rocket taking off. I think they actually believe
Mhm.
that. And the truth of the matter is the best venture guys or PE guys will just select the right
Yes.
people, but they're not, and look, I went to school with a lot of these guys. I'm too much of say too much sometimes, but they want to think, oh yeah, we made the rocket go from like from Earth to this or that, and but we took it to Mars. And I'm like, yeah, not really. It was on its way, dude.
That's right. Well, is there anything else in that journey, that second 10 years of the growth game selling to, you know, banks and credit unions and, financial services? Maybe this turned into less about software and more about data or something like that. But what happened in
Sort
that
of.
journey here that made it really go and be profitable? You were bought
It's
by private equity,
it's
so it was profitable.
yeah. It was so unsexy. It was so unsexy. I mean, it really was. I mean, I remember the year was 2008 or 9, and I'm like, "Wow, this CPA thing's not working out. Let's go sell to
Yeah.
banks." Well, what are we gonna sell to them? I don't know. Let's sell them something. And I developed a spreadsheet program that competed directly with Moody's and S&P, and people at the company thought I was nuts. Can't imagine
Hmm.
why. And I said, "No, no, we're just gonna get it out to market. We're gonna out hustle them. We're gonna listen to the customer, and we're gonna make the product better and better and better much more quickly," which is what I learned at Intuit. Remember, Intuit was my first big customer at Sageworks, and Scott
Oh,
Cook,
Scott. Yeah, of course.
the
Hmm.
founder,
Yeah.
is, probably the best founder I've
Yeah.
ever
Super
been
savvy. Right.
around. Yeah, yeah. And so it wasn't super sexy, and it is not to this day. You just listen to the customer, you improvise, and you
Yeah,
pivot.
right. So this thing grew and it was profitable. Did you get constant offers like founders get these days, even at very
Yes,
small numbers? We want to fund, we
yes,
want to buy, we want to
yes,
do this. What made
yeah.
you want to sell it and how did you go through that process? Did you shop it with an M&A advisor? That kind of thing?
Oh, man, I feel like I sold my family.
Yeah, that's true.
I gotta say that, maybe because of my background, I think I'm pretty resilient. I
Yeah.
mean, I feel very good about that. So I'm always looking ahead. I can't, the past and ahead, ahead, ahead,
Mhm.
ahead. But now that I reflect on it, and Greg, you know this, when you start a company, you've always got this founding team of
Mhm.
people and they're in and it's your
Yeah.
family. So I think back on that a little bit. I'm like, well, maybe I shouldn't have done it or whatever. But again, you got to look
Mhm.
forward. But what happened with me is the types of problems that we faced were much lower scale and frankly less interesting. And I just couldn't imagine running the ball up the middle
It
for
got
the
less
next
fun
10
for you.
years.
Like, the
Yeah.
challenges got more, the good news
Hey,
is it got
Greg.
more predictable and manageable and all of that.
Yeah. Hey, Greg, you know something interesting too? I don't know if you experienced this. I'd love to hear what happened with you, but we stopped laughing as much. When we were running out of money and almost going bankrupt and, we got sued for patent
Yeah.
infringement, which was a BS lawsuit. When we were doing that, we were laughing all the time. We stopped laughing. It was weird. The joy or
Yeah.
something went away.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm saying, it sounds like a platitude, but for the entrepreneurs listening, hey, if you're going through some stuff, like try to enjoy the journey. I
Yeah.
mean, really, because it's the best time of your life.
Yeah. And acknowledge there's different phases of growth where things change and not everybody joins it. And it's not all there's new fun
Yeah.
things and new less fun things. Yeah, the game does change when you have hundreds of employees. I've had a few founders on recently that got there. I've been there, had 250 employees. It's heavy
Right.
to carry around
Yeah.
250 employees and ecosystem partners and lots of customers, and then investors
Yeah.
if
And
you've got them. You didn't
that's
have
the
that,
other
but it
thing.
gets pretty heavy.
It's a great question. Yeah. I mean, like right now, my current company, we're very
Yeah,
small. We have about 70
yeah,
employees, but at LiveSwitch, about 70. But I found, and I'm sure you found this, as you get larger, you're dealing a lot more with personnel things.
yeah,
And I'm like,
internal. Yeah,
wow, that's not why people start
yeah.
businesses.
That's right. Well, yeah, the game, surprise to everybody here, it's almost 100% external when you start the game, right? You don't wanna think about how you're doing things inside, you're just running and going. But when you have 100 or 200 or 300 employees or more, there's a
Yes,
lot of internal weight, and then when
absolutely.
you get acquired by a big company, you're always surprised that 90% of the work is internal here, right? And what about
Yeah.
the customer out
Yeah.
there? Like, that's a thing. But you
Right.
sold this to private equity. You didn't sell this to Scott Cook at Intuit, a strategic buyer. You
Right.
didn't, you sold it to, Excel KKR, which is one of the big
Right.
end games for, not sexy, profitable, serious
Right.
software businesses out there.
Yeah.
Did they have the best offer out of a wide range, or did they come first?
Oh boy, yeah, I haven't thought about this in a while. Well, we're in conversations with them, but they came back like I think a year later
Mhm.
and said, "Hey, look, we've been following the business," and they made a much larger offer. And then I was like, "All right,
Okay.
time to
So it
go."
wasn't
Yeah,
shopping, it wasn't urgency, you didn't have to sell,
no,
they hit your number in some sense, and you
yeah,
said it's
that's
time.
accurate. That's a
Yeah.
yeah,
Uh, and, when you have investors, you had very patient investors. I call them, they were donating, they weren't really investing. They gotta write a
yes,
check and say, "I
that's
like
correct.
you, good, go for it, kid."
Yes,
They're not don't have a lot
yes,
of expectations, but sometimes when you have investors, that's part of the game. I need to pay these guys back, and you didn't
right.
have that. So you had.
But I had
Yeah.
well, wait a minute though. But wait a minute. That's a good point. Let me just say this. Like I was obsessed
Mm.
with getting a return to the investors. I was
The
obsessed,
friends that
even
gave
though
you
they
2.5 million. Yeah.
oh
Yeah.
my goodness, yeah, like,
Okay, there you go.
I'm from a blue collar family. I mean, like when we borrow money like, by the way, not true of a lot of entrepreneurs, by the way, as you
Mhm.
know, but when you borrow money, man, that's a loan, dude. You gotta get the money back to the guy. So I was obsessed with that. I
Okay.
mean, I was really
Yeah.
yeah. I wanted to get a return. I'm not gonna go burn through somebody's
Right.
money. It's just not my
Yeah,
style.
so when people say, "I need funding," I say, you're not going to have total control and freedom. And when you take money, you're obligating yourself to sell the business someday. So like none of this go long and have fun and do it your way kind of thing. The more money, the less control and the more
Yes.
payback you've got to do.
But there's a lot of, and I'm sure you know this already, but there's a lot of entrepreneurs who have a very cavalier attitude about other people's money. I'm
Mm,
like, wow,
right.
they were not raised in my neighborhood.
Yeah.
Wow. It's
Most of
like,
the,
well, I lost money here. I see them in
yeah.
Raleigh. Like they start a company, they raise a bunch of money, it goes out of business, or they merge with a company. I don't know if
Yeah.
they get
Yeah.
any cash. And then they do it again and they raise money again. I'm like, and they're like those guys that come into the village 150 years ago. What do they call it?
Carpetbaggers.
Snake
Yeah.
oil
Right.
snake oil
Yeah.
guys. Yeah, they come in, they're great at their pitch, they get the money, and then a little detail, they can't run a company. So, there's too much of that in entrepreneurism just
A
generally.
surprising theme coming out of these practical founder interviews. I've been talking to over 100 people like this, and I know hundreds of founders and play the game. Practical founders are quite serious about why didn't you raise VC funding if you could? A lot of them say, I, that was just a big obligation. I didn't know if I could pay it
Yeah,
back. Like my money, I can
right.
risk. I don't
I
know.
didn't know that.
Even this risk capital, they
I
didn't
didn't
want
know
to
that.
risk that. So that's kind of a
I didn't know
yeah,
that. Yeah, yeah, no, I respect that.
yeah.
It's true, when you take money, you gotta get it back, and I take that super seriously. I mean, I don't know. I hope that doesn't sound like I'm moralizing, it's just the truth.
Yeah, and it's you have deep beliefs and commitments and values that kind of guide you in a certain way, right? And there's
Right.
literally a different value set on the other side. You sold this in 2018. Yes, you
Yep.
refreshed your bank account and said, "Wow, there's the money." What happened
Yeah.
after that? Were you still in the business for a couple
Yeah.
years, or
What a great
did you
that's
go
another
on your big vacation and buy the big house, or what did you do?
yeah, a couple of days. You know what's interesting about this? I started an outfit called Inmates to
Yes.
Entrepreneurs, and 32 years ago, and we help
Oh my
people, as you
goodness, yeah.
mentioned, to start their own businesses when they get out of
Right.
prison because shockingly, it's hard for them to get a job if they've been in prison, right?
Yeah.
And I thought I'd be the nonprofit guy, like,
Full time. Yeah, yeah,
building IDE, but I realized that while I love that organization and I'm still on the board and all that, Greg, I don't know, man, ugh, I wanna get in the fight,
yeah,
it's the nonprofit world is a little bit of a type B type of
yeah,
thing, you
yeah.
know?
Doesn't move at the same pace.
Nah, it doesn't it's not like or it's not real or as much or something, I don't
Right.
know, so I still do I to E, Inmates to
Yeah.
Entrepreneurs, but LiveSwitch is so exciting to me, because, we got the issues and we're solving them and we're growing,
So
so
this is kind of the chronic practical founder question. It's as most founders who've I've interviewed and know. How long did it take for you not being in your business with your team, climbing the mountain with these challenges, sitting on the beach to
yeah,
say, I got to start something else?
probably 2
2 years.
years.
That's a pretty good time.
Yeah,
Some people
a
say
year and a
6 months.
half,
Some people say 2 weeks. Some people say 2 years.
about 2
Yeah.
years, yeah,
And some people
and I
say, I'm
and
going
I
to
was
do something
lucky
else
because
now.
I
Like this, I did it. I'm done.
yeah.
But
I've been and I don't wanna I hope this doesn't sound like a platitude, but I've been also lucky. I don't care what anyone says, "You work hard, you're smart." Yeah, you gotta be
yeah.
lucky too. I ran into Jared Venema, comes out of, Vancouver, British
Hmm.
Columbia, like, in Canada, I
Yeah.
guess, and, he and I met, and he's been a great partner. He had his own company, and then I invested in that company, and it's been very hard, but I'm so lucky, and we didn't talk about it here, there's not enough time, but building a team is very difficult to do, and, I've been very fortunate with the people I've run
Yeah.
into.
Well, and again, it's all about the people and the customers and solving that problem. That's the crazy puzzle we're doing. So are you like just an investor that jumped over and said, I'll help you run the business? Or is it, you and others own
Yeah,
the business and you're day to day in the business here? Because I know you've got a leadership team and, 70 employees. You could be the
yeah,
investor who calls once every 5 years. Like it's not really that, is it?
yeah. No, not really. It was a great theory, though.
Ah,
No, I'm very involved in everything, in product and
yeah.
everything, so I'm all in again, working 70 hours, 80 hours, whatever it is, so it is what it is.
Yes. You might say you're addicted to that, Brian. The quest.
Depends on the
Yeah.
day.
We
Depends on the
yeah.
day.
My wife likes the movies, the big fantasy movies or
Right.
all the crazy movies and Star Wars, everything else. And that looks interesting to me, but it's kind of contrived. And I think there's 100 times more drama
Yeah,
inside software
that's right.
businesses. I'm kind of
Oh, yeah.
addicted to that, and the hard problems, the big
Yes.
puzzle, all of that kind of stuff. But usually these software companies, funded or not funding, don't make for great TV. Like it's not the same kind of drama everybody else is
Right.
used to. But
Yeah.
you know, every software company has high drama. Founder oh
Oh
shit
god, yeah.
moments and customers
Oh, yeah.
here and the Death
Yeah.
Star and like the whole thing is happening.
Well, I call them near-death
Yeah,
experiences. We had about 10 or 15 at Sageworks. I mean, they're
yeah,
very, very tough.
yeah,
And you know
yeah,
that, Greg. I mean, I don't even have to
yeah,
ask you that. You know, you ran a company,
yeah.
so yeah, it's tough, yeah. And you gotta be mentally
But
tough.
you made a TV show out of your Inmates to
Yeah,
Entrepreneurs, called Free
I did.
Enterprise. Like, did it capture the drama of creating
It
a bit?
did.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, it's funny, that ran on ABC. I did it 2 seasons.
Mhm.
I didn't have the bandwidth to do more than that, but that's the only thing I've ever done in my life where I actually it was just joy,
Hmm.
like, I really love that because they did a great job
Yeah.
there of capturing the events and everything, so in the capturing the drama, but I really love doing that, but,
How many
anyway.
people have you helped with that foundation or that nonprofit?
We overstate that a little bit. I have the Brian Hamilton Foundation, Inmates to
Yeah.
Entrepreneurs. I think I don't
Yeah.
know. I think that if you look at the people who have taken the online courses and in-person courses and blah, 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 and it's near 1,000,000. I think it's above
Okay.
1,000,000 people,
Yeah.
maybe. So it's don't forget, I've been doing that 32 years, a long
Right.
time, so
What is you I see that you speak in prisons about entrepreneurship and getting out
yeah,
on your own and don't expect to get a job that nobody's gonna give you, and here's the basic principles and mindset, I guess, to think about
yes,
that. You've been to tech conferences and, the
yeah,
financial world of all the MBAs and,
yeah.
what is going on there that inspires you? Are people all the same, or are these people, you know, with
Well, no, no,
disadvantages?
no,
Like what's
no.
going on there?
You mean with the
Yeah,
people who are judicially
yeah,
involved or yeah. Yeah, that's another my goodness, you ought to do a
yeah,
podcast.
yeah, yeah.
You're good at questions. Well, I mean, look, let me just say this. There's a certain image you get. Like, before I got involved in this, I always thought everybody in prison was like MSNBC, like lockdown and,
Right.
tattoos and knives, and it's not true. I mean,
Mm,
there's a lot of people. I mean, you got about in our country, you got 1% of the people in prison. You got another 5,000,000 on
wow.
parole. Um, there's a lot of it. I mean, there's a lot of injustice.
Yeah.
I mean, like, let me give you an example. You and I, Greg, go start a company and we go bankrupt. Do you know in 10 years, there's no public record of
Right.
that anywhere?
Mhm.
Do you know if you had a failure to appear or a DUI or something kind of like that? Do you know that stays in the internet in perpetuity?
Yeah.
Like in America, I mean, that's a great
Yeah.
injustice. So, in other words, we believe in the clean
Yeah.
slate, you know what I mean? And it's not happening. So, I would say there's all kinds of people. There's too many black people in prison,
Mhm.
but it's not what you would think. There's all kinds. I've met white collar people, all and people make mistakes but at root, to go back to your question, people are people.
Mm.
You meet all types. I've had people murderers, not murderers, but people who murder people in some of my sessions, and it's people are people. They're all over the board.
Yeah. Well, we're all over the board, as, crazy, tech entrepreneurs, and
Yeah.
you're doing it again, I guess. Do you have a vision of moving back from this business when it gets on autopilot and less fun for you and focusing more on your foundation or, I don't know, learning to
I
play
don't think
golf in North
so.
Carolina?
Yeah, no, I will not do that. I don't think so. I love building things as long and I have to say this. I hope the people at Sageworks aren't mad at me, but I need to say it. When we started servicing banks, yes, it's a great economic model. Yeah, I mean, and the retention rate's great and all that. But Greg, I'm like, what? Like, it's not like, my God, I'm selling software to banks, So what I'm trying to say is I will stay here as long as I see the dream of being able to truly help people with our technology. And video has a long way to
Yeah,
go.
yeah, we're early innings there.
So,
Well, there's a certain
yeah.
irony to the misfit freedom, very disciplined about the funding. You understand the financial game, sold to banks, your software is about
Right.
funding and everything, but now you're an investor and you sold the private
Yeah.
equity and, now you're in the money game. It's kind of funny that half the time at the local pitch events, the biggest investors in the crowd are the bootstrappers who never took the funding, right? Is
That's
that
right.
kind of thing.
Well, because shockingly, they own their
Right.
companies, yeah. By the way, small detail, by the way, if you're getting money, you might wanna think about having a little control because it
Mm,
will affect you at the liquidity event big
yeah.
time. But you're right, I wanna mention this, like, people would say things like, what's the term, Greg? "Oh, yeah, like, what type of return are you getting in your
Mhm,
money?" Or whatever, and I'm like, "I don't have any money." All the money I'm getting, I'm putting back in the
mhm.
business, so now I have these fancy guys at Morgan and Goldman,
Yes.
and they manage my money, but it's oh, yeah, that's it, trying to get yield. I'm like, I need to get yield," and I'm like, "What? What do you do?" "I'm in finance." So, "Get yield." "Oh, yeah, you want a higher
Mhm.
return." That is such a different thing from going out and creating a
Ah.
business, so, to each his
Yeah.
own.
So we're talking to a chronic entrepreneur, loves the game, the hard work, the tough things, creating value in the world, doing good things through entrepreneurship. And you also have a pile of money that's getting this yield. What does that mean to you? Does that mean you're keeping score, the dream you had
A
about
little
the
bit.
X getting to X?
That it's a weird thing.
Okay.
Oh my goodness, it is so
Mm.
weird. Like, I think I've made more money hanging out than in building a company for 20 years. Like, there's I kinda feel guilty. There's something wrong with that. Like, there really
Mhm.
is, right? You look at the wealth gap and all this other stuff, but, like, yeah, you're hanging out and you're making money, and I'm like, that is so antithetical to
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
background. I'm like, you know what I mean? Like, it's
Yeah. No,
weird.
it's a very,
Yeah.
it's a paradox for crazy entrepreneurs. We do important things. We build crazy teams. We love our customers. We get crazy about the business. We live through all of this, and then we don't have it, and we've got the money, and it, doesn't really solve the same thing, right? We're addicted to a different
I
problem.
don't I don't have a beef with a guy starting a company, adding a lot of value to the
Hmm.
marketplace and making
Yeah.
$100 billion. I got no beef
Yeah.
with it. But the idea that you can sit on your ass and just index your fund and just make money, there's something wrong with that. I have to be creating, I can't
Yeah.
be
Builders build.
yeah, but again, it sounds like I'm moralizing. I really don't mean it to be that way. I really mean to say it's just
Yeah.
odd. That's
Yeah.
all.
And you're a builder. Builders build, right? And
Right.
you're helping others create these businesses that solve problems in the world. That's why I do what I do. Is there's a bunch of crazy people that aren't getting the help, the insight, the support,
Right.
the mindset to
Yes.
go solve a big problem in the world and do it
Yeah.
in the way they want to do it with their version of it. And we need more
Yes.
problem solvers. There's plenty of problems in the world, and
Yes.
the big companies aren't going to
Yes.
solve most of them, and the government's not going to solve most of them.
That's right.
Entrepreneurship has a place out there.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
Brian, thanks for sharing your story of Sageworks
Yeah.
and LiveSwitch and
Yeah.
the Brian Hamilton story, a unique
Yeah.
story on its own here. What final words of wisdom or advice do you have for practical founders out there? They've got a software
Yeah.
company up and running. They see
Yeah.
a problem in the world. They're dealing with the near death experiences of thinking about trying to stay off funding
Right.
and do this kind of thing. Maybe they're further along and they see an exit prize, starting to
Right.
materialize. What advice is most common for these kind of tech founders that you have that you'd like to share?
You're in a tunnel, it's dark, you're on your hands and knees, you're going through that tunnel, you're groping your way through, keep moving forward.
Ah,
I know it sounds like such BS, but, like, we've all been there, I'm telling you, we didn't have time to get into my whole
yeah.
story, and so That is the picture. You're in this huge sewer tunnel. It's dark. You just got to keep moving. Just keep chipping away. My father used to say, you eat the whale one bite at a time. You keep coming back. You keep coming back. You keep coming back. And things will get better. They will get better. It doesn't feel like it, but they will.
Yes. And what is it about that if you survive, I say you got to survive long enough to find the thing that gets you to the next level.
That's right.
And funding doesn't always help or get you to the next level, it doesn't help in the survival. But why is it that if you keep with the customer and keep moving forward and show up every day, you can solve the next puzzle?
Because you get momentum somehow. It's like compound interest. You start with $1,
Yeah.
and how does it turn into $10? I mean, it's just you build momentum. So, like, I've got to-do lists, and every day I'm knocking it off, making the product better, listening to the customer. And it's a good question. You develop the physical property of compound interest of things will get better, and then there's a break point.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh my goodness, now I'm not pushing uphill. But sometimes that takes time,
And a little luck sometimes, perhaps.
and a little luck. Absolutely.
All right, Brian.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing your story and some great insights. We got to some deep stuff here today and some of your personal story, not all of it. We could go on for hours about any one of these topics in your story. So I really appreciate you sharing it on the Practical Founders podcast.
Thanks a lot, Greg.
Thanks for watching this week's founder interview on the Practical Founders podcast. Be sure to hit like and then subscribe to my Practical Founders YouTube channel to keep up with my weekly videos for serious software founders who are building valuable companies without big funding. Check out my blog and information about my Practical Founders CEO peer groups at practicalfounders.com. And follow me on LinkedIn to keep the conversation going. See you next week.